Gregory in the 1930s. So Arthur Gregory was a citrus magnate. I've never met anyone who had enough money to be called a magnate, but I've met his grandkids. But Arthur Gregory had owned most of Redlands at one time in the form of citrus groves. He needed lumber to build citrus crates to ship it by rail across the country. Everybody loves getting an orange in their Christmas stocking. Not so much here anymore, but in the South where I grew up in the Midwest, that was like a really big thing, was everybody got an orange for Christmas because it was the only fresh fruit you could get. Arthur Gregory actually had a big hand in making sure that those oranges were distributed across the country. But to do that, you got to have lumber to build the crates. So he bought most of what is now Crestline, Cedar Pines Park, all the way up into the Grandview area. So he bought the mountaintop so that he could haul lumber down off the mountain to build crates with. As that happened, he loved the area up here. Absolutely loved it. He would vacation in Crestline. And the place where he stayed, there were some old logging cabins at what is now Thousand Pines Christian Camp. And so there was a cabin there that came down during the blizzard. We were really sad about it. We were turning it into a museum because that's where he stayed, and it just completely pancaked during the blizzard. No one was in it. Nobody was even in camp during the blizzard, so that was nice. But the cabin just completely, flattened. The bunk beds held up part of it, and that was it. Which I was like, great, I'm on a bottom bunk from now on. But he would stay at what is now Thousand Pines. At the time, it was a social club during the Prohibition era and all that went with it. He was not part of that, but he bought it from that social club and closed the club and then finished Lake Gregory Dam. So Lake Gregory Dam was started by a WPA project, which ran out of money. They lost funding on it, and they were housing workers at a couple of different places. And when the project lost funding, they just abandoned the project. So you had a halfway finished dam, and that was it. Arthur Gregory loved the area and called it Little Switzerland. That was his name for Crestline, was Little Switzerland. That's why all the Swiss themes. You get the names like Zurich and Zell and Dell and Weisshorn, and you've got all these Swiss names for all the streets because Arthur Gregory never planned to call it Crestline. He called it Little Switzerland. He owned all of it, so he developed it and designed the streets and had developers come through and figure out where to put the roads and named it all. And then he funded the completion of the Lake Gregory Dam. And so you build something, you get to name it after yourself. So that's where we get Lake Gregory. With that, as he completed the dam, 1938, there was a storm very much like the blizzard that we just had. And just like our blizzard, it was followed by warm rain. And so Lake Gregory was expected to take 3 years to fill, and it filled in 3 days. And so water all the way from Strawberry Peak goes to Lake Gregory all the way out through Top Town. Some of Top Town goes down to Cedar Pines Park. Some of it comes to Lake Gregory. So we have a huge watershed. And they had 3 feet of snow on the ground, and then it started raining. And it was a warm rain. And so it melted all the snow. So all the snow combined with all the rain, and the lake filled in 3 days. There were buildings at the bottom of the lake 3 days before it started snowing. So there's a photograph that is dated 3 days before it started snowing. There are cars parked all around the building. There's heavy equipment down there. So I'm sure the buildings didn't get moved. I believe that the heavy equipment got pulled out, but the Historical Society and I go back and forth on whether it's still down there. And so we've actually tried to use some sonar equipment to look for, what could still be down there. We've kind of identified where it would be. So nobody knows. We've never sent a diver down there to look for, old equipment. But there was definitely stuff there just a few days before the lake filled, which is just a fun, thing to argue about because there's no way to know. Did they get the equipment out? Did they not? Did the building stay? Did they knock it down on the way out? It's just one of those fun stories about the lake that, hey, it's possible that there's still buildings and equipment from when they were building because they thought they had 3 years to move that stuff. And so the likelihood that they got it out in 3 days, it's possible it's still down there, but the Historical Society and I go around and around about that just because it's fun. So Arthur Gregory finished the lake, started developing the town, and was calling it Little Switzerland. As things started selling, the Club San Moritz, which was over where Lake Gregory Church is now, in Moon Lake, that used to be a lake, their parking lot used to be a lake there. It was only about 8 feet deep. It wasn't a great lake. It was more mosquitoes than water. But that area is still a flowing creek, and where you drive in, where you turn off a dark canyon, that used to be the dam, and that was Moon Lake. And the Club San Moritz was over there. Well, it burned at 3 in the morning while nobody was there, so very likely arson, because they needed the insurance money in order to build a new clubhouse on the bigger and better lake. And so it burned in the late 40s. The pillars are still there. You can drive by and see the stone pillars and walk up the steps to the old clubhouse. But they wanted to build a new club over on the better lake. This is another one that I go, of course it was arson. Why not? You've got a clubhouse on a dinky little lake that's only 8 feet deep, and it's no fun. And now there's this 87-acre lake just on the other side of the hill, and you happen to own property there. So, yeah, you're going to burn this place down and build a new clubhouse. And so the fire was so big that they could see it all the way from Twin Peaks when it burned. They could see the sky lit up, and they knew something big was burning, but they didn't know what. It was the clubhouse. They began construction on the new Club San Moritz in 1950. And so that's San Moritz Lodge today, was built in 1950. They started on it. There's some really neat photographs of how they built it and the way that it was done. That whole building is built from trees that were cut on property. And so we have, during the blizzard, one of those big trees, I mean, these trees are, you walk up and they're that big around. You could never build that building today. But during the blizzard, one of those trees actually cracked in the roof. So one of the roof beams cracked. So we closed the building, and to stay true to its origins, we found a tree that was the right size that we needed on property, cut that tree, dried it, and then lifted the roof just enough that we could get the old cracked one out, put the new tree in, and if any of you can figure out which one it was just by walking through, I'll give you a free Duffy ride if you can figure out which tree to replace. I'm pretty proud of the construction crew. They're a local crew that did the work. Pretty proud of them for the way that they were able to match it so well that when we were finished, the county helped us fund that project to get it back open quickly. And we were so proud of how good a job they did on it. We invited people through to try to tell us which one broke, and so far nobody's picked it out without looking at the photos that we posted of the work. So we've tried to stay true to that tradition of, hey, these trees originally came from property, so we continued that. We got a Lake Arrowhead Tree Company to come and drop a big tree for us so that we could have the right size tree, and they helped us peel the log and prep it and do all the work. And then a local contractor is the one who actually figured out a way to lift a several ton tree 30 feet into the air and replace that. So without destroying the building, they had to go through the existing doors to do all that work. So they had a door about that size to move all of their equipment through to do the work. We said, no, we're not cutting a hole in the wall. You get this door to work with. And so they pulled it off. So really proud of them for that. Up to Arthur Gregory then in the late 30s. In 1938, the lake finished and filled over the 38-39 winter. At the same time, he said, well, I'm done with these old logging cabins. What are we going to do with them? And so he went to Dr. Catherwood at First Baptist Riverside and said, Dr. Catherwood, I want to give you 32 acres for a camp so that First Baptist Riverside can have a camp. And Dr. Catherwood looked at that and said, my church alone cannot manage 32 acres and about a dozen buildings. He said, that's too much for any one church. Let's give it to the California Southern Baptist Convention. It's changed names a lot over the years. So they did. Arthur Gregory gave that 32 acres. He sold it for $10, the original 32 acres of the camp, to the convention to form Thousand Pines Baptist Camp is what it was originally called. The names have changed. It's now Thousand Pines Christian Camping Conference Center. The church association is now called Aspire Leadership Network, but they're all the same people. It's been name changes through the years, not ownership changes. So since the late 30s, Thousand Pines has been there. Well, pre-COVID, they rebuilt Lake Gregory Dam. They doubled the size of it because when the lake filled too fast, they never completed the dam. They said, oh, well, it filled up and it's still holding. We're done. And they went home without finishing it. So for all those years, Lake Gregory Dam was always half the size that it was meant to be. If we'd ever had a really major earthquake in Crestline, there are faults there, there's a chance that the dam would have gone and we would have filled Silverwood up. Never happened. That's a good thing. But in 2015, the crews there found a crack in the dam. And they said the dam is going to fail. And the state listed Lake Gregory Dam as a high-risk dam. Supervisor Janice Rutherford was big in saving Crestline. We owe her a lot of credit for saving Crestline because the state's recommendation was to drain the lake. They said drop the lake level, turn it back into Houston Flats, which it was originally. They said drain the lake, get rid of it. This dam is not going to last. And so they required that the lake level be dropped somewhere between 10 and 15 feet, which is when it was just like a muddy, stinky mess, right? It was disgusting. We all despised that. But that was a requirement of the state because they were afraid that the dam was going to fail. Janice Rutherford had a big hand in the Lake Gregory, we always called it the dam committee, but it was something else. But she had a big hand in forming a committee to find the people. Yeah, that was always the, Beata Davis, director of regional parks, to this day calls it that damn dam. And so that's always been the running joke. But she had a big hand in finding the funding to finish Lake Gregory Dam, not to repair it, but to finish it. Because when it filled up and it didn't break, they said, well, we're good. And all the equipment left. And so they doubled the size of the dam as part of that. The construction company who did that work knew that the contract for running Lake Gregory was ending. The concessionaire who had it was done and wasn't going to renew. And so the construction company said, hey, we want to get that contract and run this part. But they couldn't qualify because they didn't have any experience in recreation. And so we had become friends with them through the process of them redoing the dam. There were some other connections that we had as well. So they reached out to Thousand Pines and said, hey, Thousand Pines, would you be interested in joining our bid to win the contract to run Lake Gregory Regional Park? And we said, sure, we're in. We'll do the recreation because we do lots of recreation. We train all of our own lifeguards. We have all of our own Red Cross lifeguard trainers. We have all of our own rope staff. We train people on high ropes. We do all these things. We say, hey, we know recreation. So we'll do the rec part. You do the facilities maintenance part and all of that stuff, and let's do it. Put together a proposal, submitted to the county, and didn't get it. We were not the county's first choice. They went with a group that was in big sports arenas, was their world, was sports arenas. So they manage places like the Honda Center, the Staples Center, globally. That's what they do, is these big indoor venues. Well, that was 2018, 2019. That was all happening in 2019. We got word kind of through some back channels, hey, they're gonna be the ones that get it. But then what happened in 2020? COVID. Every sports arena in the world closed its doors. So that company looked at it and said, we don't even know if we're going to survive as a company. We are not taking on this crazy project of running an outdoor venue we don't know anything about. So they backed out of the deal. Well, that ended up being bad for the county because they chose somebody who was going to be pretty contentious for the Crestline area. They were not hiding the fact that they intended to fence the park, because they said, well, there's no way to generate maximum revenue if you're just letting people use your lake for free. So they intended to fence the park like every other regional park is fenced. They had some pretty aggressive ideas that we in Crestline were pretty mad about, and saying, hey, why did you pick a group that's going to make things worse for our town? County was getting a lot of heat for it. COVID was starting to let up a little bit. We looked at it and said, hey, you've got a lake, it's all outdoors. Let's go down. We let all of our lifeguard staff go. We sent them all. Actually, they just never showed up because it kind of happened in the spring. We'd already hired our lifeguards. They were scheduled to come for training. And we said, you know what? Don't come, summer's off. We're not doing summer camp this year. First time in 85 years, we're not having summer camp. But we reached out to the county and said, hey, we've got all these recreation staff coming, and we can't open camp because we're not going to pack people into cabins, but the beaches could be open down at the lake. Let us come down and run the concession just for the beach. We'll just run the beach and the grill, and we'll bring people in, and we'll figure out how to social distance on a beach, which, yes, seems kind of silly to me to even try that. We said, we'll figure it out and we'll make it work. We talked to them, they liked the idea, we liked the idea, and ultimately it came down to county's too big and moves too slow to pull something like that off in a month or two. And so we said, okay, that's fine, not a problem. We're gonna hibernate and do our thing. You do whatever you need to do with the lake. But that conversation led to, hey, actually you guys were part of a proposal that we liked and just didn't pick. Why don't you resubmit? But we need to do it quietly. They said, we got in a lot of trouble for how we did things last time. We want you to resubmit, but we need you to keep this kind of quiet. And we weren't the only group resubmitting. It was a very public process, but everybody who was involved was kind of keeping it a secret that they were even involved. It was, yes, we know people who are doing it, but not saying that it was us. There were several groups around Crestline that came together to put it together. We reached out to the construction company who was originally in the proposal and said, hey, we're back in, like county's reopening the RFP, let's go get this thing. And the construction company said, well, actually, we've got a project that's not going well. COVID's been really hard on us too, we're out. And so we sat down and said, well, can we do this? Is this even an option if we don't have this big backer with lots of money to come in and do some of the things that are needed? San Moritz Lodge had so many leaks in the roof that it's part of what led to the tree cracking, was that there was a leak directly dripping onto a log, and so it rotted and failed. There were so many leaks and so many patches on top of patches that we had to tear it completely back down, even through the first layer of wood, and just replace from there up. That's a 22,000 square foot building. So a roof on that at prevailing wage is, price tag's a lot. Every building, by the time we got there, every building needed a roof. There was one roof that the 2018 storm had dropped a tree through the roof. They cut the tree off of the roof, but never put a tarp on it. So you could stand on the roof and bounce a basketball off the floor inside, which sat for a couple years. So you can imagine what the inside of the building was like, having a hole that big. And so we were walking into those types of things. The water slide had 2 trees laying across the water slides, all the way across. Like you couldn't walk down the slides because the gaps were so big where the trees were there. And the trees were still in the slides when we took over. There were all these things that were just broken. And without a big money investor, we said, well, this isn't going to work. So we took a shot and told the county, we'd be happy to run this for you if you give us a bunch of money to fix all the things that are broken. We way underestimated how much money it would take. So we got 1.65 million when we were awarded the contract. We got 1.65 million. We believed that we were going to sign the contract and get the keys in January, and we were worried that January to Memorial Day was not enough time to open the park for summer swimmers. And then I got a shoebox, literal shoebox full of keys, with one set on top. The rest of it was just keys, with one set on top. And the current park manager said, this is the set that I found that kind of works on some stuff, and here's the rest. And handed me a shoebox of keys.
Oh my God.
March 1st and said, the park is yours, good luck, and got in his truck and drove. March 1st. So we were worried that January to the end of May would not be enough time. We didn't actually get an approved contract and keys until March 1st. And so it was off to the races. We didn't have office space, we didn't have phones, we didn't have anything. But I made a couple of commitments to the community. We held a big community meeting to announce, we held it with Parks and with the supervisor's office to announce us as the new concessionaire. And I made a couple of promises in that meeting. And I said, we're going to clean up the park. The park had just kind of gotten grimy. There was a lot of trash, a lot of stuff. It just hadn't been cared for in a long time. I said, we're going to clean up the park. We're going to get the restrooms open and clean, because the restrooms had all been locked up because of COVID. You couldn't have restrooms open for some reason. It was silly. Big government, wild rules that don't really fit the mountain. I'm sure you guys deal with that a lot, where it's like, what? Okay, I get this in Rancho, but here, really? So I said, okay, we're going to open up the restrooms. We're going to fix the things that are broken, and then we're going to start to make things better. And we listed a couple of things that we said we're going to take some steps to start making some improvements. One of the big ones being, if you remember Mount San Moritz, all the dirt that was piled up on the ball fields for so long after the dam project, we said we're going to fix that. We said we're going to make that something useful again. And I got to work. I borrowed staff. I didn't have any money to hire staff, so I borrowed staff from Thousand Pines and set them to work. I said, trash and trails. I said, that's your job, is trash and trails. And I set them to work cleaning up the trails, just walking around every day, picking up trash, and then cleaning restrooms every time they passed them. I said, we're going to get the restrooms cleaned up, and then we're going to get the trails cleaned up so that people can just come and enjoy the park again. So it's a nice place. And then I borrowed staff for that, and then started calling companies and convincing them to give me products without me giving them money. So the 7 Duffy boats that we have, I convinced them to build the boats without a deposit. Convinced the company to actually start manufacturing product for me without me giving them a deposit. The inflatables that are on the lake, I did the same thing. We convinced, between Steve and I, my boss, we convinced the company to start building the inflatables. They don't manufacture them until you order them. We said, start building them, and when it's time to ship them, we'll send you a deposit. And then once we get some operating time in, we'll send you the rest of the money. And wildly, because of the supply chain issues and how hard it was to get stuff, strangely enough, the companies were just happy to have business and said yes. I don't think we could ever convince either of those 2 big companies to do that again. But just the way the climate worked, they said yes. And so we were able to start bringing some stuff in and start generating some revenue. We took Mount San Moritz, and by that time, we had run out of money, so of the county's money. So we had fixed every roof in the park, most of them full replacements, tear off and replace. Some of them were just patches, but mostly full replacements. We had repaired the water slides. We got those back operational. We got the splash pad back up and running. It had been years since that thing had worked. We got it back up and running. Got the boat dock. The boat dock floated away during the 2018 storm. It broke off of all of its anchors and cables, and it was floating out across the lake. And so the piece that drifted away turned out to stay in pretty good shape because it didn't hit anything. The piece that had one cable stay attached just sat there and banged into a concrete wall for 3 or 4 days and was destroyed. So we went and got the piece that was still good and put it back together so that we would have a dock and functional. We did a lot of work, but in that process, we burned through that $1.5 million just so fast. It was gone really quickly. But we had a really good year, 2021. So we started investing our own revenues back into the park. And so by the time we got started on the new meadow over by San Moritz and that whole area, we started it with county money and finished it with our money. We added a new dog park over there. Not that people put their dogs on that instead of the meadow, but it's there, so if they want to, they could. You use it? Oh, great, thank you. Yeah, so we did the dog park on purpose as hey, you don't have to turn your dog loose on the meadow. There is a dog park.
I remember at the group meeting that you guys had with the community, that the meadow was gonna have some additional things done to it? Is that gone now?
Some of those are gone. The band shell that we still want it. The neighborhood around San Moritz, a lot of those people moved in during COVID, and it was really quiet over there. There were no weddings being hosted. There was no ball field. A lot of those people don't remember a time when the meadow was loud, and so. And so it was quiet, right? There was nothing going on over there. There was no little league games. There was just nothing happening. There was no soccer. There was nothing going on over there. So it was such a quiet little valley that when we started hosting events, my phone did not stop ringing with neighbors calling saying it's so loud, and I would invite them down, and I would stand there with a decibel meter to show them like it's really not that loud. It's just that we're in a valley, and so the sound is carrying up. And you're hearing it, but it's really not that loud. And so with that, I look at it and I go, can I really put a big stage and a real sound system out there? That was part of the plan, yes, was to put a stage and sound system there. We do our movie nights to kind of help those neighbors hear some noise from the meadow, in hopes that people get used to it and kind of soften to the idea a little bit of. Because the thought is to put a big enough stage there that you could bring in a headliner. Now, whether or not we would want that for Crestline, whether or not we have the parking, but do a stage that would hold a headliner if you wanted to bring one in. Because the meadow would hold it, it's the parking that would become the challenge. We'd have to bus people in from Sky Park at that point for something like that. But the band shell is on hold. The bridge is sort of on hold because the Corps of Engineers has a hand in what happens with that creek. And so we're thinking about doing some kind of bridge that just spans it so we don't have to talk to Corps of Engineers. But that one's on hold but not canceled. Band shell's on hold but not canceled, but it's...
So where would the bridge go? Because they used to have a bridge like halfway down.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And when they removed it, it was in horrible condition.
Yeah. Our aim is to put it further down towards the lake. So bring it down so that people walking the lake are able to cut that trail even shorter, is our aim. It's like a 70-foot span, so it's got to be a pretty significant, piece of steel hanging in the air to cross that. So we're not there yet. We're just not quite there yet.
Are you ready to take questions?
Yeah, I can take questions.
Why is the community not called Lake Gregory, which sounds so good and romantic and wonderful, versus Crestline? When did that?
Russ Keller would have to tell me where Crestline came from. I think Crestline came more from the Top Town area and then migrated down, is my understanding of it. Is that area up top, Crest Forest Drive, Top Town, was Crestline, and then it sort of migrated because that's where town started and then migrated down. I believe that the name followed. There was a push 4 or 5 years ago to incorporate Lake Gregory as a town. So it would encompass the Lake Gregory community, Top Town, all the way out to Cedar Pines Park, kind of up to the Grandview edge. I think they were going to follow the sanitation district boundaries was kind of the idea. Ended up not going anywhere. I'm not 100% sure why it stopped, but it kind of stopped.
Folks down the hill, when I told them I live in Crestline, and then you live in Lake Gregory?
Mm-hmm.
No, I live in Crestline.
Yes.
I live in Lake Gregory. No, it's called Crestline.
Yep. I think if we changed the name of the post office, the town name would change. That would be it. If we changed the post office, if Postal Service would change the name, then everybody else would just jump on board and the signs would get replaced and we'd be done. Crestline, Lake Gregory Chamber of Commerce. Everybody's trying to get that name worked in already because that's where we live is Lake Gregory. I think it's just because it existed previously. Steve.
Who was the contractor that replaced the beam and the
Oh gosh, I knew somebody was going to ask. I can look back on an email and find it.
That's impressive.
It was a pair of brothers that did it.
He wants to find out so he can get the free Duffy rug.
Wasn't Doug Bunkers?
That doesn't sound familiar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a pair of brothers that own the company.
Are they still around?
Yeah, they're still around.
Yeah, so we would want to know who they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll when we're done, I'll dig up the email and find it.
What about the tree guy?
The tree guy was Wes and Joe and those guys.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. We use them as much as we can because they're just great.
No, I'm not.
He doesn't hear
I'm not about the Duffy ride. I do want to go down and do a Duffy ride, by the way, but, yeah.
Yes.
I have a question about the Duffy rides. So is there a certain price for the Duffy rides? And I saw something if you got a whole year pass, Duffy rides were free or less expensive.
Yes, so Duffy rides, if you just want to come, $129 an hour, and then a second hour is discounted from that. If you just want to come down, they seat 9 adults. If you're bringing little kids, we can swap a couple of kids for one adult type of thing. But 9 adults, and then $129 an hour. An hour is about right, I think. Some people, if they're taking lunch or something, they'll do a longer ride. I think an hour is about right. If you're going fast, you can do the whole lake twice in an hour. If you're like really on it and cutting corners. If you're taking it leisurely, it takes about an hour to go around. If you're just cruising. So I think an hour is about right. If you do any of the memberships, so the people always ask about locals discounts. We are a county regional park. Everyone in San Bernardino County is a local. So we're not allowed to, we're just specifically barred by the county from calling anything a locals discount. So our locals discount is called a membership. So the memberships are our way of doing locals discounts. We have some families that we track it. We track how many times a family comes in through the beach, they scan in, and we track how many times they use their Duffy boats and that sort of thing. If you get a membership and you use your boat every month of that membership, we do year-round memberships or summer memberships. If you use your membership, you pay for the membership and then some just with the Duffy boats. If you come into the beach twice a week and never use a Duffy boat, you pay for your membership just by using the beach twice a week. And so we have families that do both.
And how much is membership?
The summer memberships run $200 to $250, and then year-round memberships are up around $600 to $750,
And
depending
is that
on
per
what you want.
person or is it a family?
Per person. But if you're using it for the boats, you only need one membership for the to get the boat, and then the whole family's on the boat. If you're using it for the beach, then it's per person. And so we have the way memberships always work. We have some families who use their memberships, and they're getting onto the beach for like $1 a day at that point for the time that their family's spending on the beach. And then we have people who use the boats every day. We have a woman who retired recently and loves kayaking. And so rather than buying a kayak, she just comes down and uses a membership. And she's taking a kayak out for, about $1 a day for how often she's there. We have other people who buy the membership and never come. They come once and then never use it. And of course, they're getting a bad deal. But memberships are all about how you use it. We'll go here first.
I remember years and years ago when the county was still running it, they had like a tiered system that if you bought a parking pass from January 1st to like March 31st, so during the winter, you could buy your parking pass, and instead of it being this much, it was gonna be, they reduced, so it wasn't really a local deal, it was a tiered deal for, during the slow months, they were able to generate more revenue. I mean, it's something you guys might want to consider, because then the locals would take advantage.
So our parking passes, $89 a year for parking, which works out to $0.25 a day if you're there every day. So if you're using the dog park a lot, get a parking pass. The more you're there, of course, cheaper it gets. And then we do the same for fishing. Fishing is $89 a year. Every other park in previous companies, you bought like a $70 packet, and you got 10 fishing days for your $70. We just say, no, it's an annual membership. You get the year of fishing for $89. So we have some fishermen who really went out on the number of fish they take home versus what we pay for them. And then we do the an $89 a year, so parking, fishing, and oh my gosh, there's one other one. I've usually got the website up on a TV so that I don't have to. LakeGregory.com, which wildly nobody had it. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So, I have a question on the future projects. Will you be doing, more dock launching areas for people with private vessels? And, how is that managed in the off season?
So we, thank you, that's the third one, $89 a year personal boat launch pass. So if you've got your own kayak, you can get a sticker for it. We don't even require that you put it on a vessel. We just say that you gotta have one pass per vessel. So we have some people who have a kayak and a canoe and a paddleboard. They just put the pass on their life jacket, and then they've always got their pass for whichever one they bring. So that's the other one. And then our projects that are happening and coming. So the bait and tackle restrooms, we weren't allowed to put ball fields back on where the old ball fields were. County as a whole said regional parks are for parks and events, not, everyday youth sports. So that's a RIM Parks and Rec's job to provide that, not county. That was a county-wide decision. It wasn't just for the San Moritz fields, but it applied to us too. All of our designs, we showed them multi-purpose fields, so that you've got a ball field in this corner and room for soccer down here and a band shell, and we tried to kind of blend it, and it was a no. You will not put a backstop back on the field. So we just instead did the walking track with there's 2 acres of grass there with a walking track. We designed that so that families could get out and enjoy it. Moms can go, kids can play on the grass while moms walk the track, or somebody who's can't do the whole lake can get out and spend time on the track walking somewhere flat and level. But as part of that, we had that old concession stand. And the concession stand was kind of, well, now what? You've got a couple of restrooms and a concession stand. So we turned it into a bait and tackle shop so that it's still a concession stand. You still got your drinks and chips and things in there. But now it also has the bait and tackle stuff. I'm a fisherman, so I designed what we're going to keep there so that this is stuff we catch fish with at Lake Gregory. We don't have a bunch of junk stuff there. We design it specific to our lake. That's the concession stand. Those restrooms are being remodeled through some ARPA funding, actually. County went out in talking with the county. They were happy with the things we were doing around the park, and they said, what do you need? And we said, restrooms. Said, you took away a restroom on the dam. We got to replace that one, and we got to fix up some of the other ones. And so those bait and tackle restrooms are being remodeled through that project. They were supposed to be done already. Contractors slow. We're pushing them. Yeah. So they were supposed to be done about a month ago. They're having some problems. We're pushing the contractor pretty hard to say, this is your problem. You just got to fix it. Let's get these done. And the county's helping us push them as well. Today, actually, I'll get to the doc because that's a big one. Today, actually, they're breaking ground on, there's no big fancy groundbreaking ceremony. We tend to just try and get work done. We don't make a show about it. But today, they're starting construction on a new set of restrooms up on top of Chamber Hill. So you've got the Crestline Chamber of Commerce building. Right behind that, we're putting a new set of restrooms.
Used to be that fell off during the
It's further back, so it's a little bit more towards the point, but we're putting new restrooms there. Those are breaking ground today. I've been on the contractor phone with him all morning, helping him, find water and do stuff. So that's breaking ground today. Next week, I meet the contractor for a second set of restrooms going over below Lake Gregory Elementary. So Lake Gregory Elementary, you cross the street, there'll be a set of restrooms right there. The compromise, because the state won't allow them to put restrooms back on the dam, the compromise was to put 2 as close as we could, the 2 spots that made the most sense, so that if we can't have one in the middle, let's have 2 on the edges. So those are happening now. And those have been a couple years in the making, getting funding and everything secured. The dock launch, so we did a little bit over by the bait and tackle. I'm still not happy with it. I don't like what we did. We tried something, it didn't work. I'm okay admitting that, hey, I swung and I missed. Sorry. It didn't work the way we wanted. I'm not happy with that launch. We applied for a bunch of different funding for different launches around the park through the Division of Boating and Waterways, California Boating and Waterways. They came to the park and looked and said, yeah, these are nice, but they're not big enough. They said, we want projects that get attention at a state level. And they said, these little ones, okay, those are cool, but we're not going to fund that right now. We want something big. So we said, well, if you want big, let's show you our boathouse, because the driveway is so narrow that we don't let guests come down it, because We've had staff crash on that driveway because it's tight. It's one way. I mean, there's only one driveway for in and out traffic, so it's hard to get out on the street. It's just a terrible driveway to get down to the boathouse. There's a boat launch there that you can't use because they built a wall in front of it so that you can't get to the thing. We launch boats with a golf cart because that's the only thing that'll fit. The trucks won't fit in that space. So we said, Boating and Waterways, you want a big project, here's your big project. Get us a better driveway, fix all this parking, and give us a low freeboard launch so that people coming with kayaks, canoes, paddleboards have a place to launch. They gave us initially $300,000 just to design the project. That's all gone through, and we're, even with the state budget crunch, it looks like our funding is still secure. So we're moving ahead with that so that we can get the architects and engineers and surveyors in there to redesign that whole thing. And then when the design is complete, we initially just asked them for money to do it. And they said, well, you need to spend $300,000 to figure out how much it's going to cost to do it. And so then we will reapply for the amount that they say it'll take to do the project, with an expectation that that funding then comes in. Now that's a long-term thing. So we're still going to fix the one by Bait and Tackle. Sometime this winter, I got a guy who's going to build me a new thing to put over there. And then, but that bigger project is coming, and it actually becomes so that that whole area that they would redesign for parking, potentially another restroom there, but that parking area would become for people launching boats only. So people launching boats would have a dedicated parking place. The price actually comes down to park and launch, just some of the rules with the grant. So it's coming. Might be a long ways off. But it
Okay,
is
so let's take one more
Okay.
question, because then we'll have to
Just-
cut off.
So Sandwich Lodge, is that now gonna be back up for renting for weddings or events and
Yes,
things?
so we do host weddings there. We've got a weddings page. If you go through Lake Gregory, you'll find our weddings page. We host a lot of weddings at San Moritz, and then we have a couple of outdoor spaces. And then we just started a micro wedding package. I didn't know that was a thing, but so that people can bring 10 to 20
And
guests
other
instead
things
of
like,
hundreds.
memorials or
Yep,
parties or.
We do all of that
rental.
stuff on a regular basis. Yep. And so San Moritz is always available.
I know.
Go ahead.
And I'll stick around too if you have other questions.
The playground, I just looked at the website the
Yes.
other day, I'm so curious how the funding is going on that.
Yes, I am waiting on one yes. If I get that one yes, it's moving through a couple of different departments at county. We kind of got